in the frozen north. Susan Manzke, did I pronounce that right?
Yes, you did.
Yay! Is here to talk to us. She's an author, a columnist, on farmers, a mother, all kinds of interesting things, and she has all kinds of wonderful stories to tell us.
Oh, thank you for coming today on this lovely day. We came down from Seymour, which is north of Appleton, west of Green Bay, and almost 3 hours. Lovely day. We got sunshine when we got here. That was so nice. I want to talk about saving family stories and how anybody can do it. Oops, wrong way. Our son was about 4. He's now, well, I'm a grandma. So lots of times when you have, I tell people, save family stories, they're thinking, oh, I have to write all about my whole life. I can't do that. No, I'm saying start with one story. One story, don't think of another one. And just go with that. So you start with one story. If you try to think of your whole life, are we having trouble with this mic? If you try to, you'll stop. You will stop writing if you try to do too much. Think too much. It gets your head all hurt and bothered. So one place you might get ideas. This is our local museum in Seymour. Seymour is the home of the hamburger, by the way. If you take a walk yourself or with somebody you want to get thinking and talking about the old days, take them to a little museum. Some places let you touch. Little museums let you touch. I was looking for my mixer because I remember taking that. Mom would put me by the kitchen sink, and I was supposed to be washing, and I was a little kid. And she would give me that, and I would just be making bubbles. I mean, we had an electric mixer. That was just for fun. I wanted to bring that with. I have a couple other things. You want to get little stories. Little stories lead to big stories. Now I'm saying dust off your skeletons. That's up to you what kind of skeletons you get. But you can start with your photo album, which I have mine here. This one anyway. You open it up. You get some of those old pictures. And that will get you thinking and talking. If you have cousins who you get together once in a while, you have a little reunion, then you might get a whole bunch of stories, of growing up stories. Well, this goes way back. My mom is the older daughter, and this is in Chicago. And of course, it's a black and white picture that was colorized. And she was the oldest of 8. And my Aunt Lynn was the second in the family. But that's what my mom did mostly. She took care of the other 7 children. Well, they weren't all there at this time. But she was sitting in the chair. And with Mom, her mother was a fantastic cook. Mom did not learn to cook because she was too busy taking care of the other kids. And nobody really realized this until she got married and, could burn boiling water. Those are her youngest brothers. Now, I don't know if you noticed the difference between those clothes and those clothes. Yes, there's a time period. The boys, by this time, the 2 oldest girls, my mom and her sister, were working. They were buying the good things for their brothers. They never forgot that. They knew who was able to give them the nicer things and the teddy bear. It wasn't their parents, because they were dirt poor, and Grandpa seemed to go into different businesses and lose a lot of money and be more poor. My other side, now that was my mother's side. This is my father's side. My grandmother, she came from Lithuania. And I have lots of stories about Grandma. Dad's not in this picture, though. This is his older siblings. My grandfather, Adam, died when my dad was 4 years old. Now, the only thing my dad remembered about that time was he was afraid of the priest who came to stand by the coffin. And that's all he remembered. And later on, he found out why his dad died. He worked in the railroad yards. And he tripped. He just tripped and fell down and hit his head on the steel. He came home with a headache. He went to bed. He never woke up. And Dad was 4 years old. So she was left with the children, the 4 children at that time, and worked in a rag mill to put food on the table. This is how I knew Grandma. I kind of have her knees, though. Grandma always walked around with a staff. It's just a big stick. And, her knees were stiff. And she was a large lady. And she came when she was a teenager. She came on a ship. Some other relatives had come across from Lithuania before her, and she wanted to go, but it never was going to happen. Then all of a sudden, her girlfriend in Lithuania said, "I have a ticket." Now, this girlfriend was supposed to go to New York City to meet her fiancé, and she decided to stay back home and marry somebody else. So, I have a ticket. How do you get it? Well, you do everything you can, scrubbing floors, wherever you can make pennies, whatever would get you money. And she came across by herself, steerage, of course, and got to New York. The man, the fiancé, did not know that his lady was not coming. So Veronica had to tell him that he had no fiancé anymore. She married somebody else. Okay, he wasn't happy, but they talked and talked, and then he turned out to be my grandfather. That was Adam. So, yes, all these people are gone. My dad was a storyteller. He's not a writer, but I found stories from growing up listening to him just talk about life in the 30s, growing up as a poor kid. And a lot of those stories I put into a book. Now, this book is fiction because my dad can't tell me the truth anymore. He's gone since 91. But I had these ingrained in my head. So I talk, and I think I channeled Dad and Grandma and the 2 sisters when I was doing this. Because cousins say, "Oh, I remember that story. Oh, it's so good." After they read the book, and then it was one I made up. But, okay, I'm going to read you one of my stories here. And, okay. It's about sledding. They went up on a hill. This is south of Chicago. And besides finding a wringer washer, with a nice round bottom in the alley, the boys found Joey and Ziggy. The brothers had tied a piece of rope to a curved steel sheet of metal that had once been the hood of a car. Together, they were dragging it toward the sledding hill. The washer tub went on top of the makeshift toboggan, and all four boys pulled on the rope Joey had rigged up. Some other guys were already sliding when they got there. Al and another kid rode flattened cardboard boxes. Shorty had his old man's coal shovel, which left black marks in the snow as he skidded down the hill. "Let me ride first," said Wally. "I've done this before." Charlie agreed and helped his friend into the washer tub. "Ready?" Wally had to wiggle to get his body folded just right, but soon he said, "Ready, give her all you got." Charlie planted his feet, gave the tub a shove. At first, the tub didn't want to move. Charlie had to get down on all fours and push with his shoulder. In no time, the tub was sliding away down the hill. All Charlie could see was the top of his friend's wool cap. The tub spun around, sending Wally down the hill backwards. Thump! The tub hit a bump, flipped on its side. This sent Wally rolling down the hill. And with each turn, he picked up speed. "Help!" "Hop on, Charlie," Joey yelled from his makeshift sled. "We'll catch up to him." Charlie climbed onto the back of the car hood behind Joey, who was behind Ziggy. Sitting way back at the back end of the hood the hood looked a lot smaller. All the other guys pulled on the rope or pushed on Charlie's back to get the trio moving. After a few heaves, the car hood took off down the hill. As it picked up speed, Charlie decided it was a good thing that there were no trees on this hill. This kind of sled had absolutely no steering. Suddenly, they hit the same bump that had tipped Wally's tub. As they flew into the air, Joey and Ziggy pushed back, sending Charlie off the back of the sled. He would have tumbled free, but for a bolt on the hood that caught Charlie's pants. The thin material let loose with a rip, but Charlie's underwear didn't. The new wool was too strong. Instead of tearing, it pulled away from Charlie's bottom, and that's the way he went down the hill, on his bare behind, attached to the sled by the seat of his long johns. Okay, I used a true story, but it didn't happen to Charlie. It didn't happen to my dad. It happened to my sister. She was in the back of a sled. I was pulling the sled with a horse. She had girlfriends in front of her. When they hit a bump, they pushed back. Karen went off the back end, and she got her pants ripped, but her tights stayed on that little hook in the back. And she went down on her bare butt. So you can take stories and fictionalize them, but what I like to do is the fact ones. The fact ones are what you want to say forever. Mom and Dad. Now he was the storyteller, she was the listener. World War II, he was in the Battle of the Bulge, he has a Bronze Star, and let's see if I don't know if I can do this. Nope. That's their wedding day. Notice not a white, too much money for a white dress. So she got a suit that she could wear later. And she got him, he got out of the Army in that fall, and they were married in January. She wasn't going to let him slip through her fingers. Married in Chicago and eventually came out there. I said she wasn't a good cook, and she wasn't. Grandma would make wedding cakes. My favorite cake, angel food cake when I was a kid. Now I just like any cake. But she would make angel food cake from scratch for my birthday. But Mom couldn't do that. When they first got married, this is totally fiction. Charlie of the 30s is the grandpa of the 80s in this book. But the story from Barley Soup and Slug Spit, the Barley Soup story is real, and it's about my mother. She cooked, they lived in a flat, a little apartment in Chicago when they first got married. Tried hard. Toast went in the oven, got burnt. Soup went on the stove. Everybody was eating. Nobody said some of her brothers were over, and they were eating. And then finally she finished fussing around the kitchen, sat down and tasted it, and she says, this is terrible. Why are you eating? Well, we didn't want to hurt your feelings. She had put in too much salt. Way too much salt. Well, another time, finally, Charlie came home, and Isabel was cooking, and the flat smelled wonderful. She was making barley soup, and with vegetables and meat and beef. It was the best. And he got there, and he got his bowl, and it tasted so good. It was not over-salted. It was tasted just right. The best she'd ever made. Well, the barley was a little underdone. Well, that's what they thought. When they got to the bottom of the bowl, they found out she hadn't grabbed the container of barley, the box from the cupboard. She grabbed the box next to it. She had made birdseed soup. She had a canary, yeah. She had made birdseed soup. Long time ago, good story, shared in a book, and I share that. It's one of my favorite stories. The little stories. That if I wrote that little story up about the birds, it's typed up, it'd be that big. That's where you start. Everybody has silly stories. I like the silly stories. When Grandma came over, let me go back a little bit. When this Grandma came over and lost her husband and was working hard, she eventually remarried. I didn't find out until maybe the 90s or something that she had to get married. Oh my goodness. You think it made me not love her anymore? She was pregnant and they got married. She married her boarder, Leo. And they were married in church, and the reception was in the house. That was her house. It wasn't Leo's house, it was her house. So he was getting, he thought he was doing pretty good at getting up in the world because now he was the head of a family. Well, they were having their party, and all the Lithuanians in this neighborhood were there. And here comes pounding on the door G-men. They raided the reception. They had homemade booze. Everybody brought the food. Everybody brought the booze. Well, that's what they were making, If you had any kind of fruit or something, you could make booze out of it. And that's what they were celebrating with. Well, who did they take to jail? Grandma. Because it was her house. So these feds, they drag her off away from her wedding reception, and they take her to the local sheriff's office. And this is south side of Chicago. And they says, okay, we got this bad lady. I don't know what they said, but I'm thinking, and she's now your trouble. We got rid of the booze, and now you take care of her. And they left. Well, that sheriff was Lithuanian. He was part of the community. He said, we're so sorry, Veronica. We are so sorry. I'm going to take you right back to your house. And wait a minute, we got some confiscated hooch in the basement, and we're going to take that there too. So he stayed for the party. Nobody liked the feds anyway. So she ended up in jail, yeah. but in a much younger age. When they moved out of Chicago, I was 3 years old. So I'm not a Chicago person. We came out to the boonies. Now, I guess it's a suburb. It's called Lincoln Estates, and it was a little tiny subdivision with 2.5-acre plots. And we really were in the country. We were in no man's land. And they bought a house. Oh, that's me. As a baby. Oh, wasn't I cute? I had red hair. And took a while for me to get born, though. Mom was in the hospital in labor like 3 days. Finally came. That's my sister. She always hates my picture because, well, first, this picture, she's naked, but she never had a lot of hair because she's blonde. Saving family stories can start with a spiral-bound notebook. This my dad wrote. I have the whole notebook at home. My dad went to 8th grade. Then he had to go to work. This was the Depression. So, okay, my sister B always could outdo me, it's all capital letters, of any candy or popcorn that I might have. Her chicken game backfired on me. Baloney, you're always the chicken, and I'm always the farmer. I want to be the chicken. Okay, you can be the chicken. Give me your popcorn, and I'll feed you. Now you get down on all fours and start crawling around, go cluck, 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 and your sister B is scattering popcorn for him to eat off the freshly washed floor. That's not written there, but everything went fine until I got a popcorn stuck in my nose. Just close your mouth and blow a couple times. It wasn't until much later I realized she fed me my popcorn, and she was always eating mine at the same time. And then she left with hers. You don't have to start out looking like a book. But you know what I like about these things now? I go through Create Space. This is self-published. Your book can look just as good if you can type on a computer or if you have relatives that can. Like I took Dad's words and that story's in here, the chicken story. I expanded it much more. His stories when he was telling them were real lively and had a lot more words. When he wrote them down for me, they were a lot stiffer. No punctuation. Do you think I care? If I found something from my grandmother, which would have been, I think she was illiterate, but it would have been in Lithuanian, I found a letter and I had it translated by somebody, but it was about somebody from the old country who had passed away. It wasn't her. You love these letters. You love these stories. They are worth saving. They're real history. The world is not the same. And if we don't save stories, who's going to save our story? You think the presidents and the generals and those stories, those are the things that get in the history books mostly. The real people have tons of stories, and I think we should save them too. And that's why I'm telling you, you can do it. Even if you end up with a spiral-bound notebook with little stories, you start with one, and then maybe you'll get another coming your way. Dad was full of stories. And if you don't start, you'll never start. You got to take that first step. You got to take that first step. Record them. That is what we lived in when we first moved out. It seemed so big to me, but I was 3. And that was the house that they were bought half built. It was half done. It was a shell. some guy came along, some salesman out in the boonies. Well, I guess that's where some suckers were born, because he had the siding. There were sheets about this big, and he said they're indestructible. He took a hammer and pounded on it. Well, they weren't indestructible, and they were kind of pink. And that's what we had, because I know they weren't indestructible, because I once hit the house with a snowball, and I ended up with a hole. So they were, my parents weren't the best. There's a little girl over there. That's me. My little sister is in my mom's arms. But everybody worked together on that house, and my aunt lived next door. That's how we got there. My dad's sisters had already moved into that neighborhood. I don't know. Oh, she's got shoes on in that picture. I remember my aunt always walking around in the summertime barefoot. And her place, their house was a garage. That's what it was. They never had indoor plumbing. We had indoor plumbing. I would go home, walk quite a ways around, because there was a swamp between us, marsh, and to use our toilet. If I really couldn't wait and had to use the outhouse, I really had to go, that meant. Because my uncle, her husband, knew I hated going in that outhouse. And he would tell me stories about what was down there that was going to get my little hiney. And there was always bees and spiders in there anyway, and he didn't have to make those up. But they never had indoor plumbing all their lives there until they moved away. I felt sorry for them, because I really liked the flush toilet. My first swimming pool, cinder blocks and a tarp. Now, this would not go over well with, because, if we fell on those cinder blocks, that would hurt. But it was, and we don't have suits on. We have T-shirts. That's all. That's all that's on. That's my first swimming pool. See, these are the pictures from that old scrapbook that I'm scanning. We always had dogs. Always, always dogs. The first Rusty, in this first picture up here with us with our bonnets on. The first Rusty started out at Aunt Sophie's house. Then Aunt Bernice and her family moved next door, and he moved there. Then we moved down the road, and he moved in with us. He lived the rest of his life with us. I don't know if he came to protect us or what, but he was so good. These dogs were nothing much of anything. He was so good. My little sister would, pull herself up on him, and he would just look sadly up at my parents like, help. He never would hurt us, no matter what she did to him. And the other dog is, again, Rusty. We weren't very creative with names. Rusty had puppies. Back then, we'd never neutered dogs. I would never do that now. I have a dog at home, and we have barn cats, too, and we've been taking them to Cats Anonymous to be neutered, because we don't want a zillion, which we were getting there for a while. Tony Perms, anyone, ladies? You remember that? One day, Mom gave me, Susan, her little sister, Marianne, and my little sister, Karen, Perms. Dad left. He hated the smell. That really permeated the house, that Tony smell. And you see how happy Karen and I are. Marianne's smiling, but no. It was always hard to comb your hair after you got a perm. And didn't you know we were playing outside and we were getting, if we didn't, just get all tangled, we probably had burrs in them besides. Laddie let us do anything to him. Laddie came to us as a half-grown dog, puppy-ish, very sick. My parents couldn't afford a purebred collie. So he came, and he let us do anything. He was such a good thing. But Mom had a spoon-feed him. He was so weak. He couldn't eat. Then the vet gave her some medicine. Well, he didn't want to take the medicine. She found out he liked liver sausage. You can always get a dog to eat liver sausage with a pill in it. Yeah, he was so good. Snicker is the pony I'm on, a pony with attitude. He came our way. I probably was about 5, and Dad bought this pony and brought it home, a hackney, so he's not a little tiny thing. And that same night that Dad brought him home, the guy who sold it to him, drunk as a skunk, came pounding on our door. I want my pony back. He was so drunk, and Dad, well, he made sure his gun was behind the door, and he says, you guys all hide in the house. I'm going out to talk to this guy. Well, somehow he got rid of him, and he never came back again, and we kept the pony. Snicker, the pony, taught everyone how to fall off a horse. Even my dad he would just get going a little bit and then stop and you're down. You're over his head and off. He also bit and kicked, and I think some of my toes are kind of crooked from the times he stepped on me. And I remember a hoof print on my sweater and then under my sweater from him, and another time a big bite mark there too. He was nasty, and we kept him until he was in his 30s, and when he passed away in his 30s. Who knows? We're guessing how old he was when we got him, a full-grown pony. But we had all kinds of adventures with this. Eventually, somehow, we got a little 2-wheel cart, and I learned to put on the harness, and Dad and I were going for a ride, and we're just going down these back roads. Now they're full of houses and a lot of people. But back then, there was nothing. You could go and you wouldn't bother anybody. If somebody came down the road, you were usually related. So we took this pony out for a ride, and he was really good. I think he'd rather pull the little cart than have somebody on his back. But then, okay, so my sister and I took him out. No problem. Until, for some reason, my sister was bringing him back into the yard. And horses always want to get going faster when there's food on the other end. And I think he pulled out of her grasp. She was walking and holding him, coming into the yard. And he took off, rammed against the tree with the cart, broke that to shreds. I had a video camera at the time, Super 8. And somewhere there might be a film of that. Karen says every time Dad saw that, he got mad at her again. Chickens. I still have chickens. I don't have ducks. Karen is holding the duck. It doesn't have a name. But that chicken's Charlie. He came from Chicago, too. Charlie is a very popular name in our family. Dad's cousin, Charlie, brought this. He says, I got something for you. He opened up the trunk, and there was this big Rhode Island Red. And the thing was, it was real. I could, like you said, I'm picking it up. Dad could pick him up, but he hated everybody else. He chased him. Mom walked around with another staff to keep Charlie away from her, because he'd be coming, and he's coming after. Well, once Mom wasn't treed, but she was up on top of the hood of the car because Charlie was after her. She jumped up there, and then she got so mad at him, she swiped the stick and hit him in the head. And I thought she put out his eyes. After the swelling went down, he went back to chasing her again. You'd think he would have learned. They made me tie him up because he wouldn't stay in any pen. So a little piece of baling twine, and just around his ankle, and he would be staked out unless I was with him. So he got so used to walking around, when I would untie him, he'd walk funny. He'd pick up that leg that had the string on it, and he'd walk like that. So, but he was a good rooster. I didn't have many chickens at that time. What happened with Charlie, he had one hen, and I think a coyote got in, and there was chicken feathers all over from both of them. Oh, that's my horse. Goldie was a dream come true for me. Little horse. Now, I'm a writer, so one time, when I talk to students, I tell this story. I was a sophomore in Mr. Gould's English class. We had to write a descriptive paragraph. You never know what to write about. Like I'm telling you now, you don't know what you want to write about with your old stories. Well, I came home, and I had just had an accident with her, and that's what I wrote about. We were going up and down the gravel road. It was just before school started. Goldie and I think I just had a blanket over her. I know I didn't have a saddle on, and I had a bridle. And we were just taking our time, nowhere to go, just up and down this gravel road. Well, she got tired of this, and she wanted to go back again to eat, her favorite thing. And when we got to the end of the driveway, she reared up. Not a problem. I was like a fly on her. She did this always. She never bucked, but she would rear up. This time was different. This time, she slipped in the gravel. Her back feet went out, and we were going down. You know how you go slow motion? Well, she landed on my leg. Lucky for me, I was tucked in right between her belly and her front leg. I got a lot of gravel and grit and got up bleeding, but not broken. I was so mad at her, I punched her. Rubber horse, yeah. Then I pinched her. Then I got back on and made her go back and forth a few times. At the same time, my mother was sitting in the yard crocheting. She never saw this happen. I came riding up in front of her, and I said, Mom, I had an accident. And she looked up and saw the blood coming down my leg, and then we had to pick out gravel, and we had to go get the shots, and oh well. I wrote about that. True story, descriptive for the English class, and was the first time people reacted to one of my stories, besides somebody at home. That's when I became a writer. Of course, I wasn't good, but that's when I became a writer. Oh, another collie, Barney. The tree in the background had a limb that went up kind of at an angle. He would follow me up the tree. Pinky. We also dressed these guys up, but I don't think I have pictures of that. Pinky the cat and Barney, they had stuff on. And we were always playing outside, making from junk. Dad would always, he was the creative one. He made that thing. It was an iron bar. So you had to watch out when it came swinging by. The best one was made out of a wagon wheel. And we would twist up. 4 of us would be on each corner with the rope. And you twist that up. And then you let it spin out. And then as it finally released, you went swinging out from the swing. Oh, that was the best. That was the best swing ever. We were very creative finding things. So this is, us a long time ago. I didn't introduce. My husband Bob is on the corner. I write a lot about Bob because I write in the Wisconsin State Farmer and the Seymour Advertising Community News. And Bob is a farmer, and we've been together since '73. Actually, we weren't married there, but there we are. There are all kinds of family stories. I have been writing a weekly column since 1980. You never know what I'm going to write about. I may write about coming here to Janesville for next week. I'm not sure. That's our firstborn. And his sister came along a little later. And then we moved up here. She was only 1 when we moved up from Illinois to Seymour. I have all kinds of stories about these guys. But I want to go back. When you're looking, you can't, you have the urge to write. You don't know what to write about. Remember that museum part? I have a collection of hats. I do hat programs too. But this hat reminds me of my mom. Back in the 50s, you didn't go out away from the house. Women did not go. Lipstick on, hat on. We weren't real big in gloves, but some people were. Well, Sunday maybe. Sunday. But this one, I'm sure my mom had a hat like this. They come in all different colors because I have a couple different colored ones. When you think about things that will jog memories, food also will jog memories. Like I said, my grandma and her angel food cake. She learned as she aged that she could do certain ones. I don't know which box mix she used, but she says, it tastes just as good as mine. Why am I working so hard? So she converted to doing the cake from the box. And no one ever knew. I don't know why she shared that with me. I know everybody did not know the story. My other grandma, I said she worked and worked and worked. She wanted her family to become real Americans. She felt this was really hers. Anybody ever see these kind of stoles? When she could afford her own stole, she was an American lady. My sister won't get near this. This is my grandma's, our grandma's. You know, I think I lost a foot here and there, but it's because it's pretty darn old. And somebody else was saying the organist in her church, his church, used to wear this when she was playing the organ. And it would be dancing around there, and he'd be laughing, getting in trouble. So this made her feel more American. Oops, I'm sorry if I'm hitting that thing. Things that will spur you to create your stories. I'm telling my stories. Has my stories made you think of some of your own? I hope so. I was thinking of things that were in, this is actually electric iron. It is heavy as all get out that women worked with. Boy, you had to have muscles. The other ones that went on, the heaters like this, but this one had a cord on it. So it had been electric. And think of all the work that the women had to do. And you had to iron everything. Everything wrinkled. There was nothing. I don't iron anything. When my kids were small and they had to go in for testing for like kindergarten, they didn't know what this was. No. When our oldest son was in high school and we had company, and he got out the ironing board. I did have one. Ironing board and iron, and he was doing his shirt, and somebody said, he's ironing? I says, well, if he wants it ironed, he's doing it. I don't like to iron. I like sweaters. You can also go onto the farming side. How many people know men who wore hats like this? Didn't have to be an engineer. I know some farmers who still wear hats like this. There are stories everywhere. Do you have any questions? Because I have a few more pictures, but sometimes somebody writes and sends me a story that they have, that they want to share in a letter. We used to get those stories in letters from people. Maybe once in a while you'll get an email story. Too fast, some of those stories just go by. And I just found out last night one of our grandsons broke his arm. He's only 8, and I feel so bad. And those are our 4 who have made us grandparents. Russell should be coming to our house tonight. I never would stoop to buying Halloween, store-bought plastic things. We made some of the screwiest outfits. Oh, farm story. Farm stories. This actually is not our Gleaner Combine. One fall, when we were younger, the kids were all in school, and it was the last field we had to combine our soybeans. I was bringing over emptying wagons while Bob was out combining with a Gleaner Combine. And it was a beautiful winter day already. There's just a little tiny snow, and the beans were opening up, cracking open just like they're supposed to, not like today when they're soggy and won't combine. And so he says, well, there was no cab on my tractor. So he said, come on, we'll sit in here and while I'm combining and until I'm ready to fill up the wagon. So I got in, cheek to cheek on the one seat. And it was just lovely. It was warm in there and everything. And we got about half mile off the road. And Bob says, he's looking down at it going. He says, I don't think it's cutting right. So he says, stay inside the cab. I'll go down and see what's wrong with it. And he gets down and he looks at it. Then he walks around to the back. And then he comes back and he says, I think you should get out of the combine. It's on fire. Bob is very low-key. So we had, and I was thinking a little smoky thing, from, it was blazed. The battery had already melted. It's a gas combine. So we thought, well, let's get out of here. And so we started walking toward the road and through the stubble, and then we got pretty far up, and then we thought, well, we're far enough, and we turned around and we watched the gas blow. It was actually just half the machine that blew up, but nobody noticed. I was sure somebody would be sending the fire department. We were so far back off the road, nobody saw it. So memorable stories. Our family, I always was like, I got my first good camera when I was doing some newspaper work for the Press Gazette in Green Bay, and they used to have stringers. They don't anymore. And so I was playing with cameras. Now our girls are so much better with cameras than I am. But I actually got the camera more for taking pictures of my family and having fun. The way I wanted to do this, Bob says, you're going to kill us with that camera up there. Somehow he rigged it up a little bit better so it didn't fall on our heads when the timer went off. There's still always, I've been writing about them since 80, so Rachel was born in 82, the youngest. Actually, I came home from the hospital when Russell was born, and that's when the first editor took my column. Okay, some of the grandchildren have grown since these pictures, but I like these pictures. Actually, this boy is 16 and driving now. I can't imagine that. That's the way I still see him. And I think that should be an advertisement for dog food or something. Harrison's 3 now. That's the kind of pictures Rachel takes. She's in Sun Prairie. She takes wonderful pictures. She took this picture and then her girlfriend did. She got us all set up. So we be together. And this is our little grandson that broke his arm on Thursday. 2 places. So we've got step-kids, step-grandkids, and you can't tell one from another. They're all special. And they all have a good sense of humor. Like us. There's stories there. I want you to write your stories. Don't start with the big idea. Start with little ones. Start with maybe a recipe. And then you remember, like my mom's barley soup, how some can go astray. Or you could set the kitchen on fire. My mom always did the best fish after they loved pan fishing. And they had bluegills, and I hate cleaning fish. I like to catch and release now. Really, I just like to throw it in and just not catch. When I was a kid, I'd fish for a while with them because they loved it so much. And then my sister and I, she'd go looking for crabs, and we'd look for frogs, and if we were on the shore, that was good. If we were in a boat, it's not so good. I'll tell you a secret. Mom would not tell everybody when she fried her fish up, after they were all done and she breaded them, she had a secret so they wouldn't be real fishy. She wouldn't tell anybody, and I'm sharing it today. She put Miracle Whip in the egg mix. Miracle Whip takes, or mayonnaise would probably do the same, but we always use Miracle Whip. Put that in the egg wash. It takes a lot of the fishy smell away. So I just told a secret, Mom. I'm sorry. These are some of the books I have. Now I have a collection from my early columns. Then I have my novels. They're written from the boys' point of view. In Chicken Charlie's year, Charlie's 10. And in Barley Soup and Slug Spit, Charlie's the grandpa. And he tells stories from the old days and he tells the Barley Soup story. And then early on, I was doing romances for Doubleday. I have Never Bring Her Roses and When the Spotlight Fades. So those are some of my things here. You don't have any questions? We're getting down to the bottom here. I'm thinking what else I have here. Because I want you to save your stories. I want you to give some history to your family. Now, some of the kids may not appreciate it now. Some of the kids, it's like, oh, Grandma's going on again or something. If you can't write it down, tape record it, video record it. Get it down somehow. Maybe you can type it back. Maybe sometimes churches have confirmation kids that have to do a project. Let them type it for you. They can put it in a book. It is not hard to make a book out of it. I'll leave you with one of my dad's stories. When he was young, and they didn't have much, they decided, well, they didn't have sugar except maybe to save for bread. So there wasn't cakes. But one time, they wanted cookies, store-bought cookies. For some reason, that seemed better. And Patsy Ann's Cookies was like in the next town over. You know, this is city life. You can't tell. It's streets and streets. But it was a long walk. And they went and they searched and they found enough pennies for 25 cents for a bag of broken cookies. And Charlie was going to take his makeshift wagon, all pounded together, to get the bag of cookies. And he walked there, and he remembered. He told me, there was a little bell above the door when you went in, and then the lady came out to the counter, and, "Can I help you, Sonny?" And he put down all those pennies. "I want a bag of broken cookies." And she said, "I'm sorry, but we're all out. Come back tomorrow." And tears just welled up in his eyes. And he didn't know what to say. His mouth was set for cookies. He knew his sisters were waiting back there. He did not want to have to come back another day. And she saw him. She says, "Just a minute." She went in the back room. There was a lot of banging noise going on there. Imagine that. She found some cookies, broken cookies for him. He remembered her all his life. One of my favorite stories from him. I do have, in case anybody wants a book for sale, I do have some with. Anybody writing stories?
I don't write stories, but I do write poetry, and it's about life and my ancestors and my siblings. I started writing
Sounds like you're writing
poetry as a child.
Well, there are novels done all in verse. Dust, what is it? It's about the, I can't remember the name of it. It's all in verse, and it's about the Dust Bowl. And it's in the juvenile section, so it's easy to read, and when you read those poems, you actually taste the grit. She does it so well. Look up Dust Bowl, but look in the juvenile section, and it is poetry. You are writing stories. It's just your voice. I can't write poetry worth a darn. So that's great. You can video it too. If you're getting somebody from a nursing home that gets to talking, and you can put a recorder down, they'll forget that it's there, and they'll go on and save some of those stories before they're gone. That's the whole thing. Save them before they're gone. So many of the farm stories, so many of the World War II stories. I have a story, and I don't know how to get to it from here. How do I get back to? Oh, it's on the bottom. Oh, what?
I think if you go in show,
End show?
Right there.
Okay.
and then,
Okay. This is my dad's story.
House for a little while.
How was it in World War II?
Well, wars are bad. You know, what do you want to know? What do you want to ask me?
Just how was it in the war?
Well, I was in the infantry. You know what the infantry is?
No.
They're the guys with the rifles. When everybody else goes in, the airplanes go in and bomb, tanks go in to shoot up the big things, and then whatever's left, the infantry has to go in and clean out. And they have to go, like if you go into a big town, you know, where there's a lot of houses, they have to go in house by house, cleaning out the enemy. And sometimes that could be very dangerous because you don't know, you go into a house and you don't know what's in the house. The houses are dark. So when we knew that there was no friendly people around, only enemy in those houses, we used to have a calling card that we used to throw in the door. Could you guess what that would be?
No.
A hand grenade. You know what a hand grenade is? It's a
Yeah.
small bomb. We'd open up the door and we'd throw in the hand grenade, and then we'd stand over to the side of the door and it would go boom. And then we'd go inside and look around, see what we saw. One time, we were in this little town, and I was the first one off the truck, so I was looking around for a house for us all to stay in. A nice house that wasn't, the houses are all bombed, there's no windows in them, the roofs are shot off, and There's no electricity, there's no water, there's nothing, just a shell. Sometimes you can find one with a roof on it, and that's good. I went into this house, and as I walked into this room, I saw the most ugliest soldier you ever saw in your life staring back at me. And you know what that was? A full-size mirror. And I was looking at myself. But I didn't realize what it was until it was too late. And when I had what they call a Thompson submachine gun, I fired and I shot that mirror to pieces. Okay, what else you want to know?
Like, did any of, like, your friends die?
Yeah, I had a real good friend. Real good friend. My first friend died in the United States here. His name was Jimmy Prosser. I got to tell you about him. He was fixing a motorcycle for a friend of mine, another friend. Well, this guy was not really a good friend of mine, but I knew him. And he was fixing the motorcycle, and he was adjusting the carburetor. And this guy was looking down. He wasn't paying the attention, and they ran into a truck. And this guy saw it in time and ducked, but Jimmy didn't see it in time, and he was killed. And I was the honor guard. I had to bring the flag to the mother, you know. And they told me just to bring the body home, and it was in Galion, Ohio. I had to go from Kansas to Galion, Ohio on the train, and I sat on top of that casket because I seen him once. I'm sitting on the train looking out the window, and I see him taking my casket off the train, and I knew it didn't have to come off. So I had to go to Galion, Ohio, with the body, and I ran and I told those guys, don't take this off the train. They said it's supposed to transfer. I said, no way, no way. They said, oh, you're just laying there waiting for the firing to stop a little bit so we could go but try to get up that hill again. When I told Jimmy, I said, Jim, come over here by me behind this tree. He says, baloney. He says, if you're going to get hit, he said, you'll get hit any place. He says, if you're behind a tree or behind a bush or behind a log, he said, it doesn't matter. And I said, okay. And he had a Reader's Digest, and inside of that Reader's Digest, he carried all the pictures of his mother and his girlfriend and his sister, and he used to open that up all the time, pulling out of his pocket and look at it. And he was looking at it. And then all of a sudden, me got hit with the machine guns and mortars and everything, and I had to put my head down like this, you know, cover my head. When I looked up, Jimmy wasn't there no more. I looked. I says to somebody, you could hardly talk. There was so much going on. I said, where's Jimmy? Where's Jimmy? I says, he's gone. And then the guy went like this. In other words, he says he was hit right square almost on the back. His body, I don't know, his body went flying a long distance away from where I was at. And then we tried to make it up the hill again, and we went a roundabout way. And when I got back to battalion headquarters, they're asking me, you know, where is he? How come you guys didn't bring him back? I said, I couldn't. I said, I was carrying the mortars, and I was carrying the bazooka, and I had to fire it and everything myself. I says, we came around a different road. So this one boy, who was his good friend also, was very, very mad at me. He thought that Jimmy got killed because of something I've done. And the guy says to him, well, are you crazy? He says, you weren't there, so don't blame him. He said the only thing he could have done was maybe with a big net, if he could have caught that mortar. And he said, and now you know we're talking silly. He said, there's nothing he could have done to save him. Nothing.
Record some of those stories. When you hear somebody else's stories, it tends to spark your own stories. And you can't help it because they're back there. You just got to nickel them out a little bit. Get them out of there. And do it. Just think of one at a time. If you try for your whole life or try going to a certain place, you can always move the papers around. Okay, oh, this came before this, and, on computers, you cut and paste and move things around, so that's easy. You gotta just get them down. That's the whole point. If you don't get them down, they're gone. And we don't have a lot of years left.